So we are now in session, and the first order of business, I think, is to welcome our new member, Peter Riordan, who is a new member, a newly appointed member of the commission. And Peter, I know your bio went around, but give us 2 minutes, not 3.
I'll make it less than that even.
Good.
Peter Riordan, have been a resident in town since 2008. Have been a member of Darien Boat Club since shortly after that, and my wife and I spend a lot of time on the water in the area, and so my interest in this commission comes from being an interested constituent on the water and wanting to understand more and help in whatever way I can. So in a nutshell, that's who I am.
Well, welcome. We're glad to have you join us.
Thank you.
And if I'm not mistaken, you've also become associated with TV 79.
Yeah, that's correct. That's sort of the professional tie, right? So this is the passion interest, and that's the professional tie. So I've spent 40 years in media and entertainment, and so when John Skorotsky and I were talking about this, he's like, you need to talk to Jim Cameron as well.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
John Keena, you're next up. Anything?
Just a couple of things. I'll give a quick summary of how things went this summer. I assigned a little over 20 new moorings this year. That doesn't account for people that were actually moved within the harbor. I really don't count those as new assignments, but 20 new boats to the harbor. I removed 8 people from the wait list after having conversations with them because I explained to them, talked to them about the length of the wait list and are you really serious about getting. So 8 elected to drop off. 20 plus people deferred to 2026, and I let them know that I was counting that as their first deferral. 25 plus people did not respond to either phone or email inquiries. So I'll be sending an email to them separately, letting them know once the ordinances pass that you may be asked to accept a mooring this year, and if you don't, you could possibly be taken off the wait list. But we'll wait and see what happens with the ordinances. So right now we have 249 approved moorings in Darien Harbor. I have 19 on approval hold, but some of those are investigation. I would say about 5 of those are Darien Harbor, so those are 5 more moorings that could be assigned. The wait list stands at 175 right now. And I only had one person who did not complete their permit application this year, so I'll be having a talk with them. And the last thing I was going to say is I received a letter today from Ned Lamont stating that they've elected to make me your harbor master for another 3 years. I guess they couldn't find anyone else crazy enough. But it says, dude, my term will now be moved till June 30th, 2028. So it looks like I'm here for a little while.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm glad to hear that, John. Speaking of the ordinances, I went back and forth with Adele Conniff last week. She has taken over for Frank in the RTM committees, really as the driver of the car for getting the ordinances moved along, receiving the comments, turning out a V2, if you will, and recommending final RTM and BOS approval. For those who remember that the finish line was supposed to be in September, it's now the end of October, and it may be in November. So that's all I know, because it is in the RTM's remit to get a new set of ordinances completed. I'm optimistic that it will.
Mm-hmm.
None of the objections that we heard were either showstoppers or unable to be incorporated. So there was a way through. But it's not now. One of the ordinance changes, John, was going to be making you the special harbor
Constable.
constable. Did the BOS go ahead and do that anyway?
Yes, they did. I attended one of the executive sessions for the Board of Selectmen, I think it was a couple of months ago. And they, I guess, in preparation for this, appointed me constable. But it's not official really until I think the ordinances kick in.
No, I think it's official, but the job description isn't written until the ordinances kick in. Good, I'm glad to hear that.
Can I ask John one question? Before all the boats disappear from the moorings, would it be worth next week with the mooring guys from Norotan to drive around the harbor again and see if we can come to consensus as to spots we might use for next year so that those are ready and waiting?
Yep. The very spot that we opened up last year was vacated this year, so I have to find somebody for that spot. They're only there for a year.
Yeah.
So it's constant turnover, but yeah, I would be in favor of that, sure. Yeah.
Okay.
I know working with Scott and his team, we've actually removed a couple of moorings from the harbor because either it was very shallow there or it was already crowded in that place of the harbor, so, we can find space elsewhere.
Good. Okay.
The only thing I was going to add about the ordinances, and you said, I had heard Frank say that after our meetings, in a series of meetings that we had in June, that there were going to be some revisions. I don't know, has anyone seen any of the revisions?
So, through May and early June, we, in conjunction with Frank, made a series of revisions, and then town council said, that's okay from a drafting perspective, but it doesn't have any power because you had version 1 that was approved by the BOS. And from there, it has to go to the RTM committees, first being Frank, the TGSNA,
Yes.
and then on to the Parks and Rec.
Yes, but in the course of review through, I think, was it Rules and Park and Rec, were there any revisions made there?
Nothing that wasn't in red line form,
Okay.
meaning my understanding is, yes, there were revisions made, but it's just drafting.
Okay,
It doesn't make it to the real deal until the different RTM committees sign, Wayne Fox and Company approve, and then the RTM votes. And I see in the back of the audience nodding from Commissioner Jusins, who I guess we should introduce. He's a guest here tonight. Could you stand up for 2 seconds and maybe approach the mic and just say who you are?
Sure. My name is Eric Yostin, 8 Cedar Gate. I, among other things, I'm Chair of Environmental Protection in town. Been on the commission since 2012, been Chair since 16, 17, something like that. So I happened to meet Flip, and he suggested that I stop by to see what you guys do, see where we have common interests, see where we can work together, because I think what flows down the rivers here ends up in your harbor, okay? And so I think there's a lot. I can tell you what our commission is thinking and where we push people, et cetera, with when people try to do work within the regulated areas. And I think that would be very helpful for you. And I'd love to hear your suggestions as to what what additional things we should consider. So basically, for those of you who don't know environmental protection, it's called Environmental Protection Commission. The state calls it the Inland Wetlands and Water Courses Commission, and that's probably a better definition, but it's too many words. And so, people think we regulate birds and frogs and stuff. We don't, okay? We do indirectly. But basically, if there's a water course or a wetland, those are scientifically defined. We are allowed to control the surrounding areas. If it's a Goodwise River, we control 100 feet to each side. If it's an unnamed intermittent stream that happens to pass by your house, I have 50 feet to each side. And so when people come to planning and zoning and say, I want to build a pool, classic, okay? They will come and if it's within our regulated area, they would come to us and we would try to negotiate alternatives. We look at alternatives, we look at what they're doing in terms of plantings and soil, et cetera, and then we try to create one of the things we try to do is create buffers between lawns and streams, and so that we encourage, of course, natural fertilizers and things like that. But when you may like it, but the next person who buys your house may not read or comply, and so we try to create buffers that 10 to 15 foot buffers between kept land or lawn and the river source in order to keep the nitrogen fertilizers out of the streams, because I just think that there's a lot of nitrogen that goes in the streams and goes down, and I know algae loves nitrogen, so, and I think that's part of it. So anyway, those are some of the things that we regulate in terms of, but basically, if there's a stream or something near a property and somebody wants to do something, their first stop is EPC to get something done and get it approved, and then assuming it's approved, then we'll move on to planning and zoning. Okay, who has the final say? And yes, there are other deviations of zoning board of appeal if there's a hardship, et cetera. But basically, EP comes to EPC first, and then goes on to planning and zoning. So, and planning and zoning controls many other aspects of height, width, et cetera. So, but that's EPC.
So Eric, thank you for coming tonight and attending this meeting. Eric and I were chatting actually on Great Island one morning. We ran into each other, and we were both just talking about the Great Island project, talking about the different impacts that may or may not have as it gets refined on both the upland environment and then the adjacent coastal waters. And I suggested that it would be great if Eric could show up at one of our meetings, among other things, just to give a face and a name to all of us. I think one of the main areas of activity for our commission over the last, 10 or 15 years has been increasingly focusing on the water quality of coastal waters of Darien. And it doesn't take too much effort focusing on that to come to understand that all of the waters, the freshwater and the saltwater, are intimately connected. And what happens in your area of jurisdiction then flows downhill and comes into our area of jurisdiction. Much of the focus that we've had historically has been on nitrogen, but nitrogen coming from failing septic systems, sewer leakages. There's obviously natural sources of nitrogen, the geese droppings and mice droppings and all that stuff. But whatever we can do to work with you to help, like fertilizers and lawns and everything else, not come into our water. I think one of the other areas of impact that may not kind of come to immediate awareness of most people onto the coastal waters is when people put garbage or log piles or all sorts of things near the edge of the streams.
Amen.
And then there's flooding waters that come, and all of that stuff shows up in the Darien harbors come the next big rainstorm.
Yeah, I absolutely feel, excuse me for interrupting, but one of our big things is when there's an application, we go out and visit the site, and we try, we look at the entire site, and one of the things is if there are wood piles, debris, leaf piles, etc., within the regulated area, we make that a condition of approval that it's removed and it is eliminated by, and so we're very careful about that because people, the other thing that's true is trees that are in the regulated area, to cut down a tree, no, I don't want to get too doctrinaire about this, but we typically say, hey, if it's dead, it's dead. Okay, a tree has a life cycle, and if it's dead, it's dead. Take a picture of it. Call his name is Rick Tagliavelli, who's the EPC officer for the town of Darien, and just say, hey, in case somebody calls you, I'm taking down this tree. Okay. That said, we have examples of people, clear cutting. Okay, well that's clearly not acceptable, and so we have, we're very careful about debris and things like that, grass clippings, leaves that in the fall, we will typically get calls that said, hey, my neighbor at such and such is blowing leaves into the Lake Ness, okay, and or we have other calls that people are doing something to Holly Pond, okay, that shouldn't be done. I think there'd be universal agreement like that, and so we would get that call, and we'll send him down, and depending on the gravity of the situation, we can issue a cease and desist, okay, which is, and they have, they stop at their own peril, and then once that happens, we can say, well, okay, we have to remediate, and then it's up to us to decide what's an appropriate remediation plan. If you cut down a huge tree, well, you just can't dig it up and replace it. So, there's negotiation that goes on with things like this. But it's very clear that the coastline in Darien is remarkably beautiful from my perspective. I grew up in town, K through 12, the whole thing, and so I know Darien from way back when, and I think we're privileged to live in it's absolutely beautiful. I mean, I sometimes in the past I've taken my commission out to lunch, and we've gone to Rowayton Seafood. I specifically asked for a table overlooking the 5 Mile River and say, look at that, okay? The beautiful houses, the riverside. Listen, we want to keep the landscape the way it is. The other thing, the Environmental Protection Commission is also the Conservation Commission. Okay, the town has lots of conservation easements around, and when there's land trust, which is type of open space, and there's when plots get subdivided, there's conservation easements, and people sometimes offer conservation easements. So we control those easements, and to do something on those easements is a big deal. I'll give you a great example, Great Island. For those of us who have Great Island, there's a circle at the entrance. Okay, when that was subdivided way back when, they had by state statute to give up or to create a conservation easement. Okay, now the owner can determine where. Well, they determined it was from the circle, I guess, the entrance and the egress. Okay, so it's 13 acres. of essentially marshland. So the question was, they wanted to change the legal control as to who maintains that property. And very interestingly, so, and we had to approve that as representing the Conservation Commission, because it's conservation easement. And there's many around town that, I'm always surprised at when I see it. But those are other things around town. But Great Island is one particularly because it's so old. They're vernal pools, for example. And a vernal pool is, well, it defines itself, but within that, we have jurisdiction of a major radius to say, okay, well, there's a vernal pool here, and it extends out. It extends out the jurisdiction as to what people can and can't do. So that, and it does affect you, because when development happens on Great Island, it's going to affect the coastline. Okay, it has to, in terms of usage, if nothing else. And so I actually saw a couple of guys where the old house is on, go down the rocks and go swim in the water. So I thought, hadn't seen that, I'd never seen that, and that affects you guys, and you guys have to be aware of that. But getting back to the original point, the old sewers, et cetera, I've talked to the sewer commission about, because one of the things that always bothered me, hey, there's a heavy rain, can't swim, okay? And typically that's because old sewers are not there. How do we convert people how do we convince people to go on sewer lines where they can? And so, unfortunately, I believe it's the P&Z thing now. If you do a major reservation, which is 50% of your house value on the grand list, okay, they really want you to connect to the sewer. Okay, so, and they'll let them handle it professionally through the sewer lines, and because I think that will cut down on leaky sewers and sewers that were within 50%, within 50 feet of Gorham's Pond, for example. Well, now it's 100 feet. Okay, well, that's because we understand it a little bit more, and so those are the type of things that I think we would have interest in, and it would be an excellent conversation between us to understand that and try to come up with common objectives and work together on that.
I agree, and I think we should discuss further how we can actually have maybe a smaller working group established that would just kind of establish the reasonable and possible from the ridiculous, and to sort of separate it and
Sure.
focus on the stuff that I think Zagrodzky's famous for saying, that he always tries to find what a reasonable person would conclude. But I know from the coastal waters that I see as a boater, periodic swimmer, that what comes down into the waters of Scott Cove or Holly Pond, therefore Norotan Bay, it's really affected by what's upstream.
Absolutely, and we would encourage you, just because you walk around town and you see things that when there are issues, like for example, there's a dead tree. We can go to the homeowner and go, we can't force you to take down the dead tree, but we can say, hey, it's okay. No, we're not going to come and say anything to you, because we're essentially pre-approving it because it becomes a health and safety issue. Okay,
Yeah.
that I'm sure many of us have had kids, and if there's a dead branch falls off a tree, okay, well, that's an issue. Okay, you say, hey, I don't want to have dead trees around that would create a health and safety issue.
Of course.
Do you guys have the jurisdictional ability to walk down the streams, the various streams in town, and just observe what is going on along the banks?
Actually, no. Once we accept an application, we can walk the property legally. And once the application, the CO is issued, we can go there for 5 years. Okay, and to observe, to make sure everything is done. That said, typically we would send the Environmental Protection Officer, Rick Tagliamelli, to go and do it, because, I mean, he has 40+ years of experience, Stanford and Greenwich, and now here, to be able to go through and say, hey, you know, that's an issue. Why are you doing this? You know, hey, you promised to do, you know, this and you didn't. Okay, so let's you know, let's work this out. Okay, because there's always anybody who's ever built anything knows that there's the original plan, and then you know, conditions change. So there is an as-built, okay, which has to be submitted to planning and zoning. Well, you know, things happen there, and particularly the last thing in is the landscaping, which affects us. Okay, so then Rick would go out there and look at the landscaping. Okay, I wouldn't, you know, I leave it up to the professionals to be able to go and say, you know, what's a caliber tree? Hey, we said we want this tree. Is that tree, you know, big enough, or was it, you know, the same in the spot where you said it was going to?
Flip's question makes me think of a related question.
Sure. You don't mind if I sit next to you?
ABC homeowner on Lynn Court has land that includes shoreline in the Rhone River. Application, inspection by your inspector, etc. But is the inspector allowed, empowered, okay, to walk either upstream or downstream from that application? Because otherwise, it would seem to me sort of spotty. How would you get a view of the issue if you're only looking at 50 feet of shoreline?
Well, one is you can't, the law says that you can't worsen, you can't increase the flow or decrease the flow of water downstream. You have to be able to, the law says, for example, when you build a new house and you have X square feet of impervious surface, there is a, you have to be able to contain that water, typically in a cold text that says for a 50-year storm. And a 50-year storm is 6 point something inches in a 24-hour period, defined by a certain, you know, peak that only engineers could love. And so, and they have to capture that water, and then it would seep down through the soil into there. So if you have a condition on your property that may have been previously approved under different circumstances 30 years ago, I cannot force you to, you know, EPC does not have the power to go and say, okay, if you're doing work in the regulated area, then yes, I have. But if you're not doing anything, there's nothing I can do.
But if you wanted to, just as an example, take a survey of Stony Brook.
Yes.
To see who was putting log piles up along the shore, who was mowing their lawn right down to the water, who was doing all the things generally that you're not supposed to do. Do you have the ability to just start at the top and walk all the way down?
There's no need for that. There's something called drones. Okay, and so you know, it's, you know, the old way what they do now is the town has aerials that were taken every 10 years since the 20s or 30s, and so you can compare what's been done over a very specific period of time. So one of the ones I've been talking with the Board of Selectmen is to get drone, when the leaves fall, fly drones And then I'll be able to, pick it out very carefully as to what, and I'm not intruding on anybody. I can't say, Flip, I'm walking on your property, and you can say, you legally you have the power to say, hey, get off, you don't have permission to walk on my property.
Right.
And I have to respect that. Flying a drone is a different thing.
And have they actually done those drone photos, or is that still?
Well, no, they have the aerials that are, I forget what height they're taken from, but it's interesting to go back and see the aerials and see how things have changed in our times in our time in Darien, so that, but it's not, it's taken at an altitude that I can't get down into.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to pick up, wood piles and
Yeah.
and debris and things like that. But that's one of the problem with flying a drone over is, invasion of privacy. So, I can understand the countervailing argument there to say, well, what's your real need to, and how to you're spying on me. So there is a counter argument there.
Well, I think they're thinking prospectively here. I think there's probably lots of different areas where our two commissions can work together. So I think Sam's suggestion is a good one, that we
Yeah.
try to refine those maybe in some offline conversations.
Be great.
Just one quick question.
Sure.
With the POCD process underway at this point, has your commission or yourself had any, I guess, new inputs compared to the last decade?
Yes, we had a one-off in May with the plan of conservation and development with the consultants who were writing it. We thought it would last an hour. It lasted about an hour and a half, 2 hours, and we basically ours had to do with native species, okay, because there's a lot of, the best example is bamboo, okay, and you can't, it's illegal to plant bamboo in the state of Connecticut. Look around, okay, and you'll see bamboo, okay, so we're trying to get back to the native species concept, and that we're trying to get back to, planting within, having a buffer zone between rivers and manicured surface. We're trying to get people to consider their runoff, because there's a lot of people, who are downstream. I think of Stony Brook, I think of Goodwise River, where there was a couple of storms where, one per house I saw. The river took out literally 4 feet deep of his asphalted driveway. And it was shocking, right? I took pictures of it because I couldn't believe it, right? And so obviously that was a 500-year storm. And so, okay, but 500-year storms are more frequent than 500 years. Okay, so when we've had a number of 100-year storms in the recent past that, I've gone back to the hydrologist and said, hey, maybe it's time to revise what is a 100-year storm, it's a 500-year storm, because a 50-year storm is much more common than 50 years. So that's so when you do new construction, you have to hold the water, but very, very clearly, when you build a Cultex, it has to meet certain conditions so that it can absorb the water and gradually get rid of the water. One of the ones we've all experienced here is, we used to be the Norton Heights Shopping Center, and so that road used to flood massively, okay? And one of the conditions that was built on was that they had, I believe it was a 1 million gallon tank of just space for 1 million gallons, so that when it rained, it would absorb the first 1 million gallons, and then gradually, once it got absorbed, it would gradually release it once the storm was over, so we don't have the flooding. on that road, on Heights Road anymore. So, that was one of the examples of what came up. So Craig Clarity was the engineer for that. And during one of the storms, it actually filled up exactly as he had planned. And then it couldn't absorb anymore, so it released it. It was releasing it to Heights Road and to get under Metro North Railroad and the highway.
For which I say thank you, because I am from where I live, I am a frequent driver of Heights Road. And there have been years, 10 years ago and 15 years ago and 20 years ago, when that whole stretch, basically from Vivalos to where it starts to rise near Palmer's, would be a wash.
Yes.
And I'm so glad that something's been done about that.
Well, that was a condition of approval. You can thank planning and zoning for doing that. That was one of our inputs, via, what I call the left hand, to suggest to planning and zoning that they do that. And that was one of, incidentally, one of the biggest sources of contamination that floods into the rivers, and which eventually gets downstream, is I-95.
Yeah, the tire shreds, yes?
No, just,
Oil?
I've gone to McDonald's, I finished, I throw it out, it gets in the gutter, the water comes, it goes right out, it's not treated at all. There's no catch basins because they wouldn't want to clean them. So it goes right out, right into the streams, and obviously when there's water like that, it just carries it
Well,
right
so Eric,
downstream.
I'm going to divert for a second and run off the agenda just a little bit, because item number 3 is a shoreline cleanup that our friend David Kahn organizes every year. We're doing it on November 9th. We'd love to have your team join us, meet at Pear Tree Point at 8 or 7:30, and we walk up towards Gorham's Pond, but we don't get that far. But we pick through all the Phragmites and eelgrass, and we look for plastic cans, bottles, and everything else. And the big challenge is, who's the worst source? Dunkin' Donuts is very high.
Well,
Plastic water bottles,
I would
not
argue-
far.
There's an alternate view on that one that says, is it the patrons of Dunkin' Donuts, okay, that are too lazy to, miss the garbage can and instead of throwing it into the recycling. So, but next time you walk along I-90, you see I-95, look for where the sewers, where the storm drains exit down. You will see more garbage there than, I'm always shocked. What's the Nielsen property that just sold?
Thorndale.
Pardon?
Thorndale.
Thorndale.
Thorndale Circle.
One of the issues with Thorndale for us, because you have Stony Brook going right through the middle of the property, is that there was a little arm that was right along, that was dug, okay, during the construction of I-95, so that they could run, the water would exit and flow into Stony Brook. And you have to go and see. That is, that's one of the filthiest places in town. Okay, it's unbelievable. Okay, so and it's replicated by other storm drains I've seen along the north side and south side. Okay, it's it's very sad, but the truth. Okay, and it's going into, it's basically going down. It's not stuff that deteriorates.
Well, thank you so much for coming today.
Mm-hmm.
We'll work out offline how we get our groups further together. I'm really grateful to you for coming in and saying what you have and giving us a better view, because the intersect or the connection between your area of influence and ours is so clear. So thank you. And we'll figure out a way to have greater interaction, planning,
Mhm.
maybe periodically a proposal to the BOS or someone.
Sure.
Think about asking your colleagues if they'd like to meet us on November 9th at Pear Tree Beach and see what makes it out of Thorndale Circle onto
I mean,
our beaches. We also go over to Weed Beach
Yep.
and pick up stuff that maybe left over there, and to the Juniper Road Darien Land Trust thing, which acts like a giant catcher's mitt for the water that comes over the dam out of Gorham's. So we care a lot about it, and we know that doing it once in the spring and once in the fall isn't perfect, but we take, David, number of bags?
Hundreds of pounds in any case.
Record was 240, I recall. 240
I mean,
pounds.
one of the things, I've talked to Park and Rec about this, and it just, is, I hang out, I go to Weed Beach occasionally with the grandkids, but I typically hang out at Pear Tree. And we need more garbage cans, okay? We need more garbage cans because, as Saturday morning, Sunday morning, they're full. They're absolutely full, and garbage is falling out of them like this. The seagulls get at it, the wind blows it around, etc. And so that affects the water, the quality of water in front of the beach.
Well, Eric, I don't know if this is the perfect moment to let Lori talk about it, but Lori is here. If she'd like to talk about it, she's welcome to, and she doesn't have to.
About what, garbage cans?
Yeah, and you don't have to.
I've certainly never heard that request, so maybe you're talking to our staff.
Well, I talked to Jay-Z about it, and so
Uh,
because there's also one of our suggestions was to have a recycling bin and a normal garbage bin, so that we can separate out the cardboard and stuff like this from a recycling perspective. But anyway,
Okay,
that's a little off topic.
There's another discussion for another day, but thank you for raising it, and I think there's a lot more to talk about, but I'd like to run through the rest of the items on the agenda and stay or not as you wish. And we will approach you offline about how we can have our own next steps.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Appreciate your
Thanks, guys.
comment.
Thanks, man.
So, back on schedule. Shellfish.
All right. I don't have a whole lot to update on the shellfish front.
Actually, you've got the next two.
Yeah, I'm going to just run through them fairly quickly. Shellfish, the agreement that we've been discussing for several months is done as of July, if I'm not mistaken, and everything's in good order. Talked to Roger Freight today, and that is good through the end of next year. So
And you and Roger are
yeah.
okay?
Yeah, oh yeah, and I wanted to make it clear that if there's anything else, it's, air it out, I'll bring it to the commission, but everything sounds good except for the quality of the fishing. It sounds like it's not very happy times for clams and oysters. in the
Why is
Western
that?
Sound. Personally, I'm not sure, but he's been doing this a lot longer than I have, and similar to the way he said he watched lobsters sort of dry
Yep.
up in the sound is sort of what he's seeing now
The
from his
water temp?
perspective. I'm sorry?
Water temp? I thought that was primarily the problem. Nitrogen was actually the problem for the lobsters, right?
Yeah, and I
And
think.
water temp.
I
And the
did-
water
I
temp?
did bring up fertilizers, but he was more concerned with pesticides. Pesticides don't necessarily help anything either.
No.
And it's just a ambiguous killing of everything, It doesn't save the good bugs or the bad bugs or whatever else downstream, so it just takes out everything.
What can we
but-
do about that?
I'm not positive. I think there's also a lot of development along the shoreline that creates silt. One of the things that Eric didn't mention, I think there's a lot of sand and salt that gets put on the roads, that comes through the drains as well. Not here, but necessarily on 95 for certain. But I'm not sure. I mean, shoreline construction is
Okay.
what it is, but it might run downhill.
I've got sort of a tangential thing, which I'll just briefly mention. I'm forgetting who I CC'd. I think I CC'd both of you, but Tessa Getchus, I'm always
Yeah.
getting her name, last name incorrect, of aquaculture. Sea Grant she is, but she does a lot of aquaculture work in Connecticut. She forwarded on to a number of towns, but us included, and I forwarded on to someone at the high school, a request that we undertake a study with them to identify the DNA of, what's it called, spatch? Spat, oyster spat in our harbors. Figure out whether it's local or if it's been imported from, I guess, the planting of oysters raised other places and where that came from. What is the DNA of our local oyster populations? And that would help us understand, what they can tolerate, what their makeup is, how they interact, I guess, in maybe different DNAs would react in different ways to things happening in our harbors. Understand the oyster population better. So I forwarded that on to, it's looking for citizen science, participatory science. I forwarded that on to the high school teacher there who's, I've had interaction, Eugene Viterman. He has an eco lab, eco club, at the high school that maybe they'd want to get involved with us perhaps being the sponsor. They perhaps getting out there and taking the samples to send up to aquaculture and Sea Grant.
That'd be cool.
That'd be something we could do to try to help understanding of what's going on.
Yeah, at the very least, it'd be interesting to see if where they intended for the spat to end up, actually ended up.
It ends up, yeah.
So that's sort of an interesting thought, though, because oysters have been native to our waters forever. And so the suspicion is that some spat may have been brought in to sort of farm that come from different places that aren't,
Not suspicion, I mean,
It's
they
happens.
get.
and that aren't as durable
I don't know.
for our waters, or aren't as tough.
I don't know anything about that, but I think they routinely purchase seed oyster from different places in order to grow it out in their upwellers. We've seen this together.
Yeah, but
Kramer
it-
had them in Norwalk over in the Cove, and then they're also over in Norwalk as well with who's the other guy?
Tim Kramer.
Tim Kramer had them in
And
the
Norm.
Cove.
Norm.
Norm Bloom has them at his docks over on the other side.
But
They're-
the first of all, the only oysters in our local waters are American oysters. There's no
Virginia oyster crabs or
Virginia,
something.
yeah, and so there's no Pacific oysters, there's no real foreign oysters are here.
So how the DNA can differ, I don't
So
understand.
you might have different strains,
Yeah.
like there's definitely hatcheries of oysters up in Cape Cod and up in Maine and so.
And they were doing it on Great Island for a while, hatching their own
Yeah,
oysters
and it's not
putting
hard,
those-
it's
putting
not
those
hard
out
to
there.
spawn oysters and create spat. So I don't know if she's worried that, like, we have Maine oysters. They're the same species, they're just
Yeah,
live in a different
I
place.
think she's acting as a conduit to a science group that has gotten money to do a study. And
Yeah,
she-
I mean, it would
and
be
they regard it
interesting to
as
do.
worthy, so.
It would be interesting to do the study and just see what it says, but it's not like there are foreign, like really foreign oysters that are in our waters.
Although, who knows, right? I mean, you have ballast tanks that suck up crabs, in the Mediterranean and squirt them out here, and
Yeah.
next thing you
But
know,
you-
you've got those species.
The different oysters species look very different, so, I mean, you would
would know.
notice them if they were seeing them.
I love this from a participatory aspect. If the eco club gets involvement, and it might spark some young kids to want to do more, and the high school teachers to want to do more on the coast with projects, and we learn more and get more people involved in awareness.
Well, it would be a great thing. I'll be curious to see what they study, but I mean, the study itself seems to me to be worth doing. And if you can get the Eco Club excited, that'd be
The
great.
teacher seemed very excited about it, he seemed to indicate it was.
And that they actually could do it.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And maybe our role would be pointing out where batches of oysters are growing and helping them gain access if it wasn't directly from the shore side, maybe out to.
I think gaining the access might be a logistical thing to do, either work with Roger or work with Norm, I guess.
Right, right. So we could help them with that, perhaps.
Okay,
Anyway, idea.
we'll touch base on that. That's an interesting.
I think I
perspective.
included you in the email, but yeah, great, okay.
That's pretty neat.
That would be cool.
Dredging. How about dredging?
Dredging, I have, thanks to John got sent the hard copy, I did not, but the full application for the certificate of permission to the state of Connecticut, as well as the section 401, which is the water quality certificate that is required of Army Corps. So that has been submitted as of August, and now it's just kind of in a holding pattern until they do their review at the state, and the Army Corps does their 6-month review between Connecticut and New York and dispose. But this sediment is approved already for open water disposal. Now it's, I'm honestly not quite sure what the 6 months is for after that point, but that's where they do their full-on coordination and evaluation of the application. So there was a little back and forth where they had some incomplete things. We sent them right back, and then they requested a copy of the previously dredged area, which the consultant Coastline had and fired back to the state.
So Lori and John, I don't know if you saw the maps for this proposed channel dredging as opposed to the stuff around the boat club,
Yes.
but it is more or less from Dave Campbell's house out along past Norotan to a point I imagine is kind of near the Octagon,
Yeah, near the No Wake buoy, or no, yeah, No Wake buoy.
and also a little spur
Near Pratt Cove.
into Pratt Cove. And now it looks like it's about an inch wide. I mean, just visually, the drawing, it's a narrow little channel into Nash Cove. Pratt Cove? Anyway, and it ends about 2/3 of the way in. But it's something. I thought that was gonna be off the table. I thought they were just talking about the channel, but no,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
that little spur.
Yep, so yeah, just around the dock, but, you know, we've spoken in the past, if the yacht club wants to do under their docks and stuff, that's where
Their
the
problem.
coordination has to happen. But
Yeah.
yeah, in general, it's the main harbor channel and then that little finger off into Pratt Cove.
And when do we get bids from contractors?
I wouldn't worry about that until we have the permit in hand, but that permit's gonna be good, just like the one for Pear Tree for 5 years. So
Okay.
we have time to think about that. We all thought it was a good idea just to go ahead and get that, and then
I did read in the permitting, though, that because of I guess because mostly of the shellfish, the time when you're allowed to dredge ends at like April 1st, and it
Yes.
doesn't start until
November.
November,
Winter.
Yeah, there's a window.
There are windows.
which isn't bad, right, because the boats are out of the harbor,
Right.
but there is that very much defined window.
Oh, yeah. Yep. And that kind of plays into availability of dredge rigs and, you know, whatnot, so.
Well, thank you for all the stuff that you've been doing with the back and forth with the, with DEEP and with the BOS.
Yeah, not a problem.
Well, it's great,
It's been
so
enjoyable.
keep us posted.
Certainly. Will do.
One thing I was going to mention, speaking of dredging, the dredging project around the perimeter of the boat club, which is part of that entire $9 million project. Did anyone happen to notice what the breakout for the cost of the dredge was? $2.5 million. I was flabbergasted when the estimates were between $400,000 and $700,000, and now it's $2.5 million. And the reason it scares me so much, that only represents about 10% of what a dredge would be for the Darien Boat Club. If the Darien Boat Club has the same sediment quality as the perimeter around it, what would the bill cost to dredge the boat club?
I didn't make that connection.
I don't know how we got from 400 to 700,000 to 2.5 million. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, that's a lot. I mean, the disposal is not helping. that
The
matter.
disposal's a big deal though, right? Because it is not the stuff that could be dumped in the middle of the sound.
Correct.
But
right?
the original estimates, when I first heard about this and started attending some of the meetings with the consultant, he was talking about $400,000, $700,000 because of the contaminant.
So suddenly it's 5
'Cause-
times that.
Yes, I don't understand. I actually wrote to John and I asked him, said, what happened? In 2 years, we went up 4 or 5 fold. What
Okay,
happened?
that's a good question, so let's wait for the answer.
Yeah.
I know you have a report coming, so I don't want to get too far into it, but when we get to that point, was it broken out who that subcontractor might be? Or was the contractor who proposed that bid the one who would be doing the dredge work? Like, is there a sub that they would bring in to
I
do
can't
dredge?
speak to the details of the contract. It's
Okay,
400 pages or something of
got it.
very
Okay.
technical information.
I bet. Okay.
All right, so now we're at the other ACCW business, and I don't have any other. Does anyone else?
Got the internship matter, if you'd like to.
Please.
So, I want to pass a couple of these things out. So we've been doing coastal water quality testing now. We're in our, I think it's our 8th year. And since the start, we've had high school students helping us. I don't think there's been a college student. I think it's always been high school students. And some of them have been very involved. For example, we had a woman, names are skipping me right now, but who was recommended by the Darien Nature Center, and she loved it, came out with us every time, went down to Emory College, and I believe that's Georgia, and majored in environmental science, came back and did another couple times with us another summer, and went on to be an environmental major, and actually is doing some water quality project post-graduation. So it's like that was just a score. We had a couple of other good kids who've really dug in and liked it, and I think it's really been a good experience. But in general, a lot of the high school involvement's sort of been intermittent. They have vacations that come up during our sampling season, which is from May to October. They've got schoolwork that starts to interfere in September. And the thing that's really been annoying to me is Sound Waters and Save the Sound have offered really stiff competition. They've given them more formalized internships. And some of the students this year in particular have come out with us several times, but then said they were running into time constraints. And their other internships with Save the Sound and Sound Waters were going to be their priority. And it was the same water quality testing under the Unified Water Study program as ours. So in other words, we're underperforming and these competitors are stealing our resources. So I came up with the idea this year to formalize our program, to try to attract these students and retain them a little better. And the key worry here is that it's going to take too much of our time. We're a pretty informal commission, right? But the fact is we go out 12 times a year, May to October, to do this testing. We're into our 8th year. We've done that consistently. And we know how to teach and use the students on the water. And so if we can retain them, I think it's a very valuable experience. So I reached out to 2 high school teachers. One was at Darien High, Eugene Vitamin, and another was at Lynx Academy, which is sort of like a college preparatory that people use in the summer. And said, would you help us design a internship program? We have the water side covered. We know how to test the water. We get trained by Save the Sound, and this EPA-backed Unified Water Study produces official results that scientists can use because it's got rigor to it. But we need a desktop side, a shore-side desktop version where the students can do some research and paperwork that would pass your muster, and so it would have an academic seal on it, and it's connected, heavily connected with the on-the-water technician's point of it. And so Eugene Viterman at the high school loved that idea. He heads up the eco group at the school, Eco Club. And Scott Sills, who works at Lynx Academy, brought a couple of his science teachers together, and they liked backing it too. So we came up with a paper version that the students would just create a 5-page paper of their experience. That's outlined in the second bullet here. And we're wrapping our on-the-water component, which is us taking them out on a boat, calibrating the instruments before we go, taking them out on the boat, and teaching them how to take the water samples. And together with the shoreside component, we think it's a more rigorous experience. And so it made sense to call this a internship at this point. So I think we've had our interns before, but we've never called it that. But with having the high school involved, the paper they have to submit at the end of their participation, and their experience of us on the water, it's a real internship with some hours now to it. And so this page describes it, and if you've got any questions later on, feel free to email or call. But I'd love to get, we're doing this year. I just sort of impromptu did this because it is really doing what we already do. But I think, though, for future seasons, i.e. next season, it should be more formally approved by this commission and the Board of Selectmen, and it would be nice to publicize it. And so now it's getting more out in the open, and I think endorsement is required.
But you're talking about having a compensation element of this, right?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, I really wasn't thinking of any money involved. No, and the students seem to be, well, we'll see how we can attract people, but through the years, we have attracted 2 to 4 students
Oh, I
every
thought
year.
you were gonna compete with Save the Sound or something.
I don't know if they have any money involved, but I'm trying to, they need to put something, literally, they need to put something on their resume. That's a credential. And we offer them great on-the-water experience, but if they could say that the teachers are involved and they had to write a paper,
Yeah.
I think that really ups the game. And the response we've gotten from people so far is, we want to do this, from the teachers as well as the 2 new students we've attracted.
So what do you see as the next steps between this and a BOS approval?
Yeah, well, I think this group's endorsement, whether that's a formal vote and approval, or if you think just an informal, hey, we all agree this is a good thing, let's move forward. This is not meant to cost anything. I think it's taking a little more time of the 3 people who are leading the water quality testing right now, which is myself, Rob Roberto, and Julie, off commission with Julie Jones. So we've got a little more time that we have to do to shepherd people, but it's incremental, quite frankly. And the help on the water and some of the extra duties they're doing now as part of this in calibrating the instruments and stuff, I really think is boosting us, so that's good.
I don't know if we need a formal vote or not, but to me, this makes sense for us to do. I guess I have one question, just as I think about the town's government, which is, do we have to coordinate with the Board of Education at all? Because you're sort of offering an educational experience to kids in town.
That's a good question, and when I first set this up, we did actually coordinate the Board of Education. I had a number of conversations, and they were gung-ho on it, and we had conversations in the first couple of years. It totally skipped my mind, though, for this incarnation of it, so I will. I have to reinvent the channels, but I will.
Why don't we just take a sense of the commission, not a formal vote? If we need to have a formal vote at some point, we can revisit this. But how do people feel about trying to push forward on this front, assuming that Board of Ed says it's a good thing?
I think if you can make this happen in conjunction with your teachers, it's a great idea. It accomplishes what we want, which is a continuation of the water quality testing.
Establishes it. Yeah. It also creates an impact in the community, which I think the testing effort to date has only marginally done. It needs to communicate the results and get more people involved and more awareness.
Agreed. I'm just saying that in terms of the technical results of testing the waters. We've been doing it now for a dozen years, and that's a good thing.
Right.
Now to offer it, if you will, as a way for students to get internship, to actually learn, write about, and get credit for it, I think that's great. Good for you, but I do think the Board of Ed, maybe our friend Vitterman, did I get his name right? Can carry that ball. But yeah, it should be, particularly if the kids are giving some sort of internship credit. The credit is, the logical question is by whom? It's got to be the Board of Ed, so they got to sign on.
Yeah, we've got Christian Dockham, who's the head of the science department, involved. And he's
Great.
been involved prior.
Good.
But, I will circle up with all these fellows in the Board of
Then
Ed.
go forth and conquer.
Super. On this same score, this year we've reinvigorated the partnership with the Nature Center, Darien Nature Center. That's a light partnership in the sense that it means they give us their storeroom to store the equipment, where every 2 weeks we come and calibrate it, bring it back, and recalibrate it. And they've been really friendly about moving space, so we had have a little lab area and stuff. And I started this up on the Leela Wetmore, who was the ED, and there's a new woman now, his name is escaping me. But the whole staff there is really friendly. Long and the short of it, on November 13th, a Thursday night, they have offered their space for us to give an end-of-season presentation on the water quality results. And Rob's came to do it, Julie and myself, and we thought we'd get up and put the charts up there and explain the program, and also go a little into debris, because I think that's another concern about water quality.
And this is November
November
13th
13th, a Thursday night, and so far 6:30 p.m. is our target.
at the Nature Center.
Yeah, and this is, again, part of coming out of the closet with of our water quality testing and getting more people aware of it. I think
And-
that's a big part of this.
Can you get Jay-Z to put a little plug for this in his weekly?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. The Nature Center is going to do it 3 weeks prior, and I'll tee that up here, yeah. So,
Good, good for you.
super.
Agreed.
Lori, if anything, the floor is yours. I've added you to the agenda. You don't have to say anything, but if you've got stuff that you want to share with us, please do.
Sure, well, the main update is that we are in the process of going through the various boards and commissions in town to get the approval for the funding for both the Weed Beach and the Pear Tree projects. The projects themselves are fully approved. This is not to get the projects approved. We have all the necessary approvals, local, state, Army Corps, whatever, depending on the project that we need. And those are in place. The projects both went out to bid over the summer. We did receive bids for both projects, and the lowest qualified bidders have been selected for both. The Pear Tree project, all in, is coming in at just under $9 million. The low bid was $7,997, but on that project, Weston and Sampson has suggested an 8% contingency, and then you add in their construction management fee and bond issuance costs, and it comes in at $8,982,000, give or take. So that's the price on that one. Weed came in
And
lowest.
when would that start?
When I do the money, and then I'll tell you that. I'll just do the money on the two. Weed came in at $1,847,000. Weston Sampson feels we only need a 5% contingency on that. You add in the management fee for them, and the bond issuance cost, and it comes in at $2,135,000. It turned out that the lowest accepted bidder for the two projects ended up being the same firm. And both projects would be scheduled to start shortly after November 1st. So using the parking lot at Pear Tree on November 9th may or may not be an issue. And then both projects would be complete by the end of May, and ready for the public use for the summer season. We've been in touch with the boat club, Colin and I correspond. They know that's coming up if Pear Tree's a go, and we'll work around that. So, because that park would most likely be more or less shut down over the winter. enter.
So, on your last comment, or your next last comment, November 9th gathering in Pear Tree could well be a problem, so we should pick 2 weeks earlier when it's low tide?
Depending on when they actually break ground, and I mean, we still have to work out, get the money, we still have to work out all the absolute logistics and whether the whole parking lot's gonna get closed down. Like, it gets into the staging and the technically, and working with Weston and Sampson, how things are gonna be staged and moved around. So whether the whole parking lot will be closed at once, or whether there is an entrance closer to the beach, there's a gate down right before the curve that goes up Pear Tree, whether there's still gonna be some access there. Not, I don't know those details yet. That has to be worked out with the construction company and the construction manager.
We'll figure it out.
So you'll just have to figure it out. I just don't know for sure at this point.
Okay. Anything else?
Are there any specific questions on the projects? I know there were some letters flying around which didn't necessarily contain accurate information, so.
Yeah, I'll go on the record, I didn't mean to stir the pot.
Yeah, but they are fully, we have EPC approval. Planning and zoning and their staff have re-looked at everything as recently as this week to re-verify that everything is buttoned up, ready to go.
Yeah, I mean, just to address, because there were obviously two letters, the kind of emails that went back and forth. I think it's my personal view, Sam, you can speak for yourself, but my personal view is that our commission's jurisdiction pretty much stops at the high tide line. And I do think, Lori, in the future, just as a matter of courtesy and sort of interest, it would be good if there are Parks and Rec projects that are kind of like directly contiguous to the salt water in town. It would be good to just give us a heads up. But I don't sort of see us as a formal matter weighing in on that stuff unless there is like something we're concerned about runoff into the into the salt water, or something directly impacting the salt water. Now, I say that so that we can have a discussion and see if there's consensus around that point of view. If there's not consensus, we can seek more clarification from the Board of Selectmen as to how we should be doing it. But how do you?
Well, I think a couple things. We're mid-September. Theoretically, November 1, these two big significant projects that are close to the shorelines are getting underway. I feel as though it's more important to think about how to deal with future projects.
Yeah,
and how
I'm
we can
not,
best
to be
do
clear,
it.
I'm not talking about as it relates to these two projects Lori was just talking about. I'm just saying, as a policy for us going forward, how as we, as a commission, should we be thinking about this? Are we dropping the ball by not weighing in on these things, or are we doing what we should do by not weighing in on them?
I think when we have figured out how we work, we integrate more with the Environmental Protection Commission, that is from the New Canaan border to the end of the Darien waters. If you
Their scope.
the scope of the two together.
Oh, yeah.
So water courses, vernal pools, shoreline, ocean, shellfish, then we can have a more overarching view of how one project or another affects us. I think Great Island is still ginning along, so there may be opportunities for us there if we figure out how we're going to interact. So my own feeling is, let's just stew on this for a while and talk amongst ourselves, talk offline, talk amongst ourselves about how to be more better integrated and proactive with everyone from Parks and Rec to environmental protection. Because I think some improvement, there's room for improvement.
Well, I will remind you that, first of all, both of these projects have been in the planning and development stage for years, over 5 years each. Weed Beach is close to 10, so it's not new news. This isn't something we sort of
No, and we're not.
dunk up. And you'll recall that you all were interested in the Pear Tree project specifically, and I arranged for Dan Biggs, who we've been working with from Weston and Sampson, to make a presentation. In fact, I think we met in this very room, and Dan was on the video, might have been when you were chair, Bill. And he did do a presentation of that, so that certainly has happened. So we did a on-site tour of both properties in February. Dan Biggs came down for the weekend. There were a number of town officials and residents there. Sam, you were there, and of course, you know, that information could have then been said. The video's available for everybody to view, so I do feel we can try to get the information out.
I'm thinking actually slightly differently, which is, in our meetings, we can probably do a better job of letting fellow commissioners and who's ever watching Channel 79 know about these. We can make we can improve our internal communications about exactly what you're talking about. I did go on the February walk around Short Lane, but I think it's possible that by Parks and Rec update is now in the agenda, it will be forevermore, that we'll be able to do a better job of just telling all of us around this particular dais about projects that are ongoing, meetings with Dan Biggs. I think those of us who felt that they didn't know what was going on, it's sort of shame on us. And so what I'm trying to do is look forward and think about how can we, on one hand, be more aware of what you're going on, how can we sort of routinize it so that, you know, when we ask you to speak here, you say, hey guys, you know, meeting in February, meeting this, and then I write it down in the minutes, it's circulated to everybody, we talk about it at the next meeting. Same with our friends from Environmental Protection. I think we can be more productive and more interactive.
But I do think we need to, in our own minds, sort of refine the definition of what we should be involved with. Like, so for instance, take the Weed Beach Short Lane project. To me, if they were talking about bringing a lawn right down to the water and throwing a lot of fertilizer on that stuff, I think that is an area that's appropriate for us to think about. Is that going to impact the coastal waters? And is there something we should say to try to prevent that? In contrast, if someone were to say, oh, they're putting in this walking path and nobody walks in town and that's a waste of money, that to me is not the part of the project that we should be weighing in on, even though it is obviously attached to a project that is adjacent to the coastal waters. So there, and again, we can all think about this, there's nothing that needs to be decided tonight, but to me, there needs to be some interaction with the coastal waters, not just adjacency, but it is good to just have a dialogue so that people can be thinking about things. I mean, I don't know, that's just me personally saying that.
And you saw where I wrote over the past week that unless I hear differently, I see our writ as kind of stopping at the high water line. And that's very simplistic, but it's also true, unless the remit is expanded.
I'd say that's true for the most part, but there are some things, the boat ramp. which I've used a fair amount, and if you put parking places or cars are routinely parked, where it makes it difficult to access, you know, like that's something that this kind of community and group is more attuned to, maybe than just.
Well, that's fair
others,
enough. That,
you know.
that touches the water. Fair enough.
The parking lot and, you know, kind of the adjacent infrastructure, or where do you park your trailer and all that kind of stuff, impacts the people that I think this group represents, right? To some degree.
Well, I think
It's voters, and,
Agreed. I recommend we adjourn, that we tell TV 79, thank you.